Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Chav Ches Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchas Tisha B'Av, and we pick up today in the midst of Siman Taf Kuf Nun Aleph, bottom line of Chav Ches Amid Aleph, with the Mechaber in Sif Yud Zayin. Says the Mechaber, Toiv li zaher miloymar shehecheyanu bein hamitzarim. It is good and proper to take care and to refrain from reciting the bracha of shehecheyanu during the time period called bein hamitzarim. That's the time that starts with Shivasa B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, what we colloquially call the 3 weeks. So toiv li zaher miloymar shehecheyanu bein hamitzarim. It is good to refrain from making the bracha of shehecheyanu during the 3 weeks. Al pri, on a new fruit, ay al malbush, or on a new article of clothing. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Tzadik Ches. Toiv li zahar miloymar shehecheyanu. It is good to refrain from making the bracha of shehecheyanu. Afal gav da afilu avel mavarech shehecheyanu. Even though this doesn't seem to be a prohibition that has to do with avelus, this is not something that's usher because we're in mourning, because we find that even an avel is allowed to make the bracha of shehecheyanu, and many times an avel is required to make the bracha of shehecheyanu. Let's say an avel lost a parent, and he inherited a large Yerusha, and he is the sole inheritor. Let's say he's not married, he has no family. So he's inheriting all of these possessions and this money, and he's not sharing it with anybody else. Then the halacha is he makes a shehecheyanu. So an avel is allowed to make a shehecheyanu, and many times an avel is mechuyev. He's required to make a shehecheyanu. So why is it that you can't make a shehecheyanu during the 3 weeks? It doesn't seem to have anything to do with avelus. Mikal Makim, nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, Yomim Elu, these days of the 3 weeks, Kevan shehazman hahu zman peronus, since this is a time of punishment, since this time period of the 3 weeks is a time of bad tidings for Klal Yisrael, when bad things happen, Ein kedai loymar shehecheyanu lazman hazeh. It is not proper, it doesn't seem appropriate to make a bracha and thank the Rebbeinu Shalom, shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higyanu lazman hazeh. We're giving shavach v'hidah to the Rebbeinu Shalom that you kept us alive and you supported us and you allowed us to reach this time. What time? The time of the 3 weeks. We don't want to thank anybody for being in the time of the 3 weeks. The time of the 3 weeks is not a good time. And therefore, we don't want to make a bracha, and we'll see, what did the Mechaber say? We don't want to make a shehecheyanu on a fruit that is now coming into season, or on a malbush, or on a new article of clothing. V'hagra b'Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim brings down that the Gra and the Berurah Gra chelik al zeh. He argues on this halacha. The kasav dehu chumri yisera. He says that this is a chumri yisera. This seems to be a stringency that's very extraneous. He doesn't see why we have to be so machmir and we can't make a shehecheyanu during the 3 weeks. And I think what the Gra says is that, again, even an avel is allowed to make a shehecheyanu. So why can't we make avelus? So the Gra was looking at this strictly within the context of hilchos avelus. He was saying if an avel is allowed to make a shehecheyanu, then why can't we make a shehecheyanu during the 3 weeks? So he didn't want to recognize this argument that there's another reason not to make a shehecheyanu, that it's inappropriate to say shehecheyanu lazman hazeh, to this time period of the 3 weeks. The Taz also argues on this halacha. Valkein, and therefore says the Chavetz Chaim, b'Shabbos ein lahachmir bazeh. If it on Shabbos during the 3 weeks, we don't have to be so stringent. We don't have to keep this chumrah. And on Shabbos during the 3 weeks, you would be allowed to make the bracha of shehecheyanu. So if you have a nice new fruit that just came into season now and you want to eat it on Shabbos during the 3 weeks, that you could do. There are many achrayim that agree that on Shabbos we could be mekel. Ice cut and Tzadik test. The Mechaber said we don't make a shehecheyanu al pri or al malbush, on a fruit or on a new article of clothing. Now, what exactly does that mean? You might be tempted to look at the Mechaber and say, okay, you don't make a shehecheyanu on a new fruit or on a new article of clothing, so I guess that means I could make a bari priya eitz and I could eat the fruit without reciting a shehecheyanu. Maybe I could put on the new suit without making a bracha of shehecheyanu. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. He's cutting Tzadik test. al priya al malbush umemela, and since you're not going to make the bracha of shehecheyanu, lo yoichal hapri, you should not eat the fruit, v'lo yilbash habeged, and you should not wear the article of clothing. That's what the Mechaber is saying. The Mechaber is saying it's inappropriate to make the bracha of shehecheyanu, therefore do not eat a new fruit that just came into season, and don't put on a new beged that requires you to make a bracha of shehecheyanu during the 3 weeks. The Kasva Achrayim, the Achrayim write, and this is a very interesting halacha, we're going to have to keep our eye out on this. The Isha Uberes, an expectant woman, Muteres Lechol Pri Beloy Shehecheyanu, is allowed to eat a new fruit without making the bracha of shehecheyanu. So if an expectant woman has a particular taiva, she has a particular desire to eat a new fruit that just came into season, she's allowed to eat it without reciting the shehecheyanu. Why? Tishema tisave, maybe she'll have a very strong desire for this fruit, and then if she doesn't get it, v'yigroim nezek la v'lavlad, that will cause harm to herself and to her unborn child. Very often, if a person experiences a particular desire for a certain food, it's because the body needs that food. I always remember, I experienced this many years ago. I had a low blood sugar attack. And at that point in time, I had no idea what it was. All I knew was I was sitting in the Mismedrash during Second Seder, and suddenly I became very weak and very, very hot and sweaty and very hungry. And I sensed that I must eat something. So I left the Mismedrash and I went out to the closest room I could find, and I'm looking for food. And I found a can of tuna fish. And the can of tuna fish was abhorrent to me. There was no way I could eat that tuna fish. So it was a very strange feeling. I was very, very hungry, but yet I looked at this tuna fish and nothing doing. Then I saw a bottle of ginger ale. When I saw that bottle of soda, I wanted that bottle of soda. I had a taiva for that bottle of soda like I can't tell you. It makes perfect sense. My body needed sugar. So the soda is loaded with sugar. That I had a very strong taiva for. The tuna fish is a protein. It has no sugar in it. So when I saw that, my body rejected it. My body didn't want it. That's the Neflayis HaBeirei, the Rebbeinu Shalom made, that the body senses what it needs and somehow communicates that to your brain, and your brain sees the food and knows this food yes, that food no. So often if an expectant woman or anybody has a very strong desire for something, it means that they need it. And if they don't get it, so in the case of an expectant woman, who's in a delicate situation, it could bring harm to her, it could bring harm to her unborn child. Maybe the baby, maybe the fetus needs the nourishment of that food. And therefore, if she wants this new fruit during the 3 weeks, she's allowed to eat it, and she eats it without making the shehecheyanu. V'chein chayla gam kein mutter. The same halacha would apply to a chayla, somebody who's ill. If he wants that fruit, he can eat that fruit without a shehecheyanu. Why? Sha'apeiros peischin loy ta'avasai. Because, interesting svara, says the Chavetz Chaim, not only is it possible that the chayla needs that fruit, but there's another reason by a chayla. Sometimes the fruit will act like an appetizer. Very often we have a person who's ill, can't eat. He doesn't want to eat, and he needs to eat. He needs the nourishment. Sometimes by eating that fruit, that will act as an appetizer, and now suddenly he'll have a taiva to eat other fruit. So in these two cases of a chayla and an expectant woman, we allow them to eat the fruit without making a shehecheyanu. So why? Because b'makom chayli lo kablinan alon. We never accepted, Klal Yisrael never accepted the stringency not to eat something that requires a shehecheyanu during the 3 weeks in the case of a chayla. So we're not going to tell you eat the fruit and make the shehecheyanu because it's inappropriate to make the shehecheyanu. So we're going to say eat the fruit and don't make the shehecheyanu. Now, what I want to point out over here is, so far the halacha that we had here was, number one, it's inappropriate to make the bracha of shehecheyanu during the 3 weeks. Therefore, you want to eat a fruit that just came into season, not appropriate during the 3 weeks. Don't eat it, don't make a shehecheyanu. You want to put on a new suit, it's something chashuv that requires a shehecheyanu, not appropriate for now, don't put it on, don't make a shehecheyanu. Then we have a halacha. What about an expectant woman or a chayla? They seem to need to eat this fruit. Okay, they need to eat the fruit. We're going to allow them to eat the fruit, but we're going to tell them not to make a shehecheyanu. So you have a particular need to eat the fruit, but don't make a shehecheyanu. Now let's see some other exceptions, and we're going to have to balance these exceptions. Continues the Mechaber, the last word on Chav Ches Amud Aleph. Aval, however, al pidyon aben. Let's say somebody had a baby, and now it's 30 days after the birth of his male bachar. It's time for the pidyon aben. When you make a pidyon aben, you make a shehecheyanu. Al pidyon aben oimer. You're making a pidyon aben, you're going to make a shehecheyanu. You're allowed to make that shehecheyanu during the 3 weeks. Why? V'lo yachmitz ha-mitzvah. Because what are we going to do? We're going to tell you, push off the pidyon aben? We're not going to tell you to push off the pidyon aben. The zman for the mitzvah of pidyon aben is now. It fell out during the 3 weeks. We're not going to postpone the pidyon aben. Should you make the pidyon aben without making a shehecheyanu? Well, let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah is cut and kuf. What the words of the Mechaber were, you're going to make the pidyon aben and you're going to make a shehecheyanu v'lo yachmitz ha-mitzvah, because we don't want you to postpone the mitzvah. The word yachmitz, we don't want you to allow the mitzvah to become a chametz stick, right? How does chametz happen? You leave the dough. Incidentally, my chabur is baking matzahs today. You let the dough sit, that's how the dough becomes chametz. So we don't want you to let the mitzvah sit. If now's the zman for the mitzvah, we want you to be b'kayim the mitzvah now. Maybe you should be b'kayim the mitzvah and not make a shehecheyanu, just like the expectant woman. The expectant woman eats the fruit and she doesn't make a shehecheyanu. So maybe you should do the pidyon aben and not make a shehecheyanu. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and kuf, ala yachmitz ha-mitzvah oy ha-bracha. We don't want you to be machmitz the mitzvah, and we don't want you to be machmitz the bracha. What does that mean? What it means, I believe, is, what the Chavetz Chaim is telling you is, the reason why you're going to make the pidyon aben and recite the shehecheyanu is because you cannot postpone the pidyon aben, because you have to do the mitzvah bizmanoi. We're not going to be machmitz the mitzvah. Once we allow you to do the mitzvah, we're not going to tell you that you cannot make a shehecheyanu. Why not? Because you have a chiyuv to give shavach v'hidah to the Rabbeinu Shalom, that the Rabbeinu Shalom brought you to a time where you could be mekayim the mitzvah of pidyon aben. That's a big simcha, and you have to give shavach v'hidah to the Rabbeinu Shalom on that simcha. So since we're telling you that you have to do the pidyon aben during the 3 weeks, because we don't want you to be machmitz the mitzvah, we're also going to tell you that now you have to recite the shehecheyanu. Now, making that shehecheyanu is also not such a stira, it's not such a contradiction to the 3 weeks. Why? Because let's take a look at the different shecheyanus that we had here. The shehecheyanu that you make over a the shehecheyanu that you make over a new fruit, this fruit just came into season during this time period of the 3 weeks. So that means that the time period of the 3 weeks is the cause of your ability to make the shehecheyanu on this fruit. Now is the season when this fruit becomes ripe, during the 3 weeks. So when you make that shehecheyanu, in a sense what you're doing is, you're giving shavach v'hidah to the Rabbeinu Shalom that he brought you to the time period of the 3 weeks. That's inappropriate. We don't want to thank the Rabbeinu Shalom for the time period of the 3 weeks. It's a zman of peronius. But that's not the case by pidyon aben. By pidyon aben, it's not the season of the 3 weeks that was geirim your ability to make a shehecheyanu on a pidyon aben. A pidyon aben could fall out during the 3 weeks. A pidyon aben could fall out on Chanukah. A pidyon aben could fall out on Pesach. A pidyon aben could fall out on Purim. So there's no relationship between the time period of the 3 weeks and the pidyon aben. When you make the bracha of shehecheyanu by the pidyon aben, you're not thanking the Rabbeinu Shalom. Wow, thank you so much for allowing me to reach the 25th day of Tammuz. No, I'm thanking the Rabbeinu Shalom for bringing me to a time where I'm able to be b'kayim the mitzvah of pidyon aben. So that's not such a stira. Therefore, by a pidyon aben, we say, since we're telling you you have to make the pidyon aben bizman, and that time period is during the 3 weeks, so make the pidyon aben, so you shouldn't be machmitz the mitzvah, and also make the bracha of shehecheyanu. Now, here's another interesting question. What happens if it's during the 3 weeks and somebody sees a nice, beautiful new fruit that just came into season, and he says, wow, I want to eat that. He picks it up, and he says to himself, I'm going to make a Berurah eitz, and I'm going to make a shehecheyanu. He picks it up, he makes a Berurah eitz. After he makes the Berurah eitz, he says, uh-oh, I just remembered I'm not supposed to eat a new fruit now because I'm not supposed to make a shehecheyanu. I'm not supposed to make a shehecheyanu during the 3 weeks. What does he do now? He has to eat the fruit. If he doesn't eat the fruit, it's a bracha of HaTorah. Does he make a shehecheyanu or does he not make a shehecheyanu? So the poskim say that he does make a shehecheyanu. Now again, we have to balance this. How come the expectant woman or the chayla, they make a Berurah eitz on the fruit and they don't make a shehecheyanu? But the person who made the Berurah eitz by mistake, he makes a Berurah eitz and he makes a shehecheyanu. What's the chiluk between the two? I believe the answer is that the person who had a taiva for the fruit and he's eating the fruit and he's going to enjoy the fruit, so he has to give shavach vayda to the Rabbeinu Shalom that he's experiencing this new simcha now of eating this new fruit. He has to make the shehecheyanu. The same way the person who's making the pidyon haben has to make the shehecheyanu. He's mechuyev to give shavach vayda to the Rabbeinu Shalom that he has the opportunity to make the pidyon haben. So we tell him make the pidyon haben and make the shehecheyanu. So too over here, you had a desire for the fruit. You're going to have a simcha from eating the fruit. You're going to have hana from eating the fruit. You got to make a shehecheyanu. So eat the fruit and make the shehecheyanu, even though it's during the 3 weeks. But the expectant woman or the chayla, they're not eating the fruit because they want to be misameach. They're eating the fruit because for them the fruit is like a vitamin. The chayla needs the nutrition of that fruit. The expectant woman, she perceives that she needs that fruit. It's not a simcha that now she has to give shavach vayda, shehecheyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu l'zman hazeh, that I can eat this fruit. They're eating it out of a need. And therefore, over there we're makel, and over there we say, you know what, eat the fruit. You're allowed to eat the fruit, but you don't make a shehecheyanu. Okay. Now let's continue the Mishnah Berurah's cut and kuf. So the Mishnah Berurah said that by the pidyon haben, you make a shehecheyanu because we don't want to be machmitz the mitzvah or habracha. We also don't want to cost you the bracha. You're mechuyev to make the pidyon haben, you have to give shavach vayda, you have to make the shehecheyanu. Kevin shigi zmano. Va'af al gav de kisher roya pri chadash ve'inu mavarach shehecheyanu machmitz habracha. The Chavetz Chaim is bringing up a very interesting point here. If you go back to Siman Reish Chaf Hey, where we discussed the halachas of a shehecheyanu, you'll see that the Mechaber says that me'ikar adin, when are you supposed to make a shehecheyanu on a new fruit? You're not really supposed to wait until you eat it. When you see the new fruit, when you see that fruit that just came into season, and now it's ripened and it's available for eating, you're supposed to really make a adin, you're supposed to make a shehecheyanu then. But we're not noyig that way. We're noyig that we wait until we eat the fruit, and we make the shehecheyanu when we eat the fruit. But says the Chavetz Chaim, since me'ikar adin, you're really supposed to make the shehecheyanu when you see the fruit, so why don't we say that by telling you not to make a shehecheyanu on a new fruit, you're being machmitz the mitzvah? The same way like by the pidyon haben. You can't push off the pidyon haben because you're being machmitz the mitzvah. If you see a new fruit, maybe you got to make a shehecheyanu right now, otherwise you're being machmitz the mitzvah. Explains the Chavetz Chaim, he says no. Become makar nevertheless. Kevin shenagu lahamten achas achila. Since lamaisa, we wait to make a shehecheyanu until the time that you eat the fruit. And if you don't eat the fruit, we know that you don't make a shehecheyanu. Lo mikri machmitz hamitzvah. It's totally proper for you to wait until after Tisha B'Av and eat the fruit after Tisha B'Av and make the shehecheyanu when we eat the fruit, because that's our minute. So we're not going to say, oh, you're being machmitz to mitzvah. You were supposed to make a shehecheyanu when you saw it, and you saw it during the 3 weeks. Now if you wait till after Tisha B'Av to eat the fruit and make a shehecheyanu, you're going to be machmitz to mitzvah. No, our minhag is we make the shehecheyanu when we eat it. So that's the appropriate time to make the bracha. That's not called being machmitz to mitzvah. Now, what happens if there's a nice, beautiful, new, freshly ripened fruit that you could theoretically eat now during the 3 weeks, and you would have to make a shehecheyanu, and if you don't eat it and make the shehecheyanu now, you're not going to be able to make the shehecheyanu after Tisha B'Av. What's that case? Says the Ramah on the top line of the Shulchan Aruch, V'chein b'pri shelo yimtza akar Tisha B'Av. Let's say you go to the fruit store, and you see a nice, beautiful new fruit, but you know that the season is very short, or you know that it's in very short supply. So the produce manager tells you, I have him now, I'm probably going to run out by tomorrow. So that means I saw a beautiful, fresh, new fruit that just came into season. If I don't take it now and eat it now and make a shehecheyanu now during the 3 weeks, after Tisha B'Av, it's going to be gone. So now maybe I'm being machmitz the mitzvah. Now I'm losing the opportunity to give shavak la'idah to the Rabbanim Shalom for this peri. Says the Ramah, v'chein b'pri shelo yimtza akar Tisha B'Av mutar levarech u'la'achloi bein hamitzarim. We don't want you to lose the mitzvah. We don't want you to lose the opportunity to make the shehecheyanu. The same thing like by the Pidyon Haben. Again, it's the same concept. By the Pidyon Haben, we're not going to tell you make the Pidyon Haben and don't make a shehecheyanu. No, we don't want to cost you the shehecheyanu. So too over here, we don't want to cost you the shehecheyanu. So too by the person who made the Berurah eitz by mistake. If we tell him to eat the fruit without making the shehecheyanu, we're going to cost him the shehecheyanu. We don't want to cost him the shehecheyanu. And again, the pregnant woman is different because over there she doesn't have such a strong requirement to make the shehecheyanu because she's not being misameach over the peri. Eis cotton kof aleph in the Mishnah Berurah. Shelo yimtza akar Tisha B'Av. If you're dealing with a fruit that you're not going to be able to get hold of after Tisha B'Av, umayri shelo yochel lishmar apri ad Shabbos mipnei sheyiskalkel. Let's remember what we learned at the beginning of the shir. In the beginning of the shir, the Mishnah Berurah told us that on Shabbos during the 3 weeks, you are allowed to make a shehecheyanu. So what's the problem? You see a nice, beautiful fruit that you're not going to be able to, it has a short shelf life, you're not going to be able to hold it until after Tisha B'Av. So buy it now, wait till Shabbos, eat it on Shabbos, and make a shehecheyanu on Shabbos. It explains the Chavetz Chaim, that's not an option here. Umari, we're talking about a case, shelo yochel lishmar pri at Shabbos. You're not going to be able to hold it until Shabbos. Memnei sheyiskalkel, it's going to go bad. Kegoin good gedonios ktanois. I'm not sure what good gedonios are. Maybe they're berries. I'm not sure what they are. But obviously it's some type of fruit that has a very short shelf life. I always tell my wife, I happen to like a very good Bartlett pear. But Bartlett pears are very funny. You buy them, they're not ripe, they're not ripe, they're not ripe. Suddenly they turn ripe, and if you don't eat them right when they turn ripe, the next day they're already turning brown and they're going bad. So they have that very, very short window of opportunity where you could really eat them and enjoy them. So the ilav hachi yikachei b'chol v'yishmareu at Shabbos. Okay, now we go to Sif Yud Ches. Says the Mechaber, tzarich li zoher, we have to take care Mishiva Asa B'Tamuz at Tisha B'Av during the 3 weeks from Shiva Asa B'Tamuz until Tisha B'Av. Shaloi leilech yechidi, you should not walk outside alone. Me arba shois at tesha shois, from the end of the 4th hour of the day until the end of the 9th hour of the day. So during these afternoon hours, the end of the 4th hour is not really afternoon, it's late morning, but from late morning until evening, you should not walk alone. Why? Mishum, says the Ramah, shebahem ketev meriri shoylet. Because there is a mazik, there is some kind of a creation, some kind of mazik, that's called ketev meriri, and the ketev meriri could bring harm to a person during that time period of the day, and mainly during the 3 weeks. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Kov Beis, me'arba shoyis atesha shoyis, Hainu misayf arba, this means from the end of the 4th hour, ad sayf teisha till the end of the 9th hour. V'chein yizaharu b'yamim elu shelo leilech ben chamal etzel. And also, and I'm not sure 100% what ben chamal etzel means, we are told in the Gemara that the shedim and the mazikim, they don't like walking not in the sunlight and not in the shade. So if it's a very sunlit area, they don't like going there, and it's a totally shady area, they don't like going there. But the area that's bein chama l'tzeil, between the sun and the shade, that's where they like to go. So since we're being told over here that during the 3 weeks we have to take care, we have to be careful not to be harmed by the mazik of the ketev meriri, stay out of the area that's bein chama l'tzeil, so that you shouldn't come to the harm of the ketev meriri. Continues the Mechaber, v'lo yaku ha-talmidim hayom mehem. Also, you should not hit talmidim. You should not hit students. A rebbe should not hit a student, shouldn't strike a student, or a father should not strike a son to discipline him during these days, because these are days of danger, and there's a greater chance of bringing somebody to a sakana. The Medrash in Eicha Rabbah says that, forgetting exactly it's a story with Rebbe Avo. Rebbe Avo saw somebody pick up a wooden stick, and he was going to hit somebody with a wooden stick. And Rebbe Avo saw that behind the person holding the wooden stick, there was a mazik that was holding a steel stick, a barzel, an iron stick. Now, nobody else was able to see the mazik. Rebbe Avo saw the mazik. So Rebbe Avo asked the person who was holding the wooden club, why do you want to murder your friend? So the one with the wooden club said, I'm not going to murder him. I want to hit him. Maybe I'm going to hurt him. But I can't kill him with this wooden club. He said, yeah, but you don't realize that there's a mazik that's following you, that when you hit him with a wooden club, the mazik is going to hit him with an iron club. So you see from that medrash that somehow when a person is going to do harm to another person, that spurs, it could bring along a mazik, that the mazik will also go do harm to that person. So during the 3 weeks is not a time to use any kind of physical discipline. A Rebbe is not to strike a Talmud, and a parent is not to strike a child, because you never know during the 3 weeks what that could bring to. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Kuv Gimel v'lo yaku Talmidim, mefarish b'medrash ta'afilu b'ritzua yesh li zahir. You shouldn't even strike a Talmud or a child with a strap. And you see that this is brought down from the Eicha Rabasi, and I believe that this is that same medrash, because you might be hitting with a strap, but you don't know what that's going to spur the mazik to do. Ubekavanas ha'ari kasav, the Kavanas ha'ari writes, sheyisabel b'yomim ahem, we should be in mourning during the 3 week period, achar chatzi ayoim, after chatzos, v'yivkeh k'may chatzi shah, and we should say tikkun chatzos, so we should cry over the churban for a half an hour. Now, there's an interesting Dirshu footnote here, Dirshu footnote 128. In this sif, in the Shulchan Aruch here in Sif Yud Ches, we are introduced to the concept that the 3 weeks is a time period of sakana. It's a time period where we have to be very careful not to do things that could chas v'chalila bring to sakana, to put somebody in danger. So over here in footnote 128, they write, how about to go someplace where it's possible that you could come to sakana during the 3 weeks? Das agoin Ramosha Feinstein, the Rishivas al-Sal Zechesad Kodesh L'Racha, Sharoyu Lihimana Mizeh, that it's proper to refrain from bringing yourself into any kind of chash sakana during the 3 weeks. V'chein das agoin Rishmol Vosner Zatzal, V'lirchaitz b'yam b'yamim elu, to bathe in the ocean during the 3 weeks. Right? You're allowed to go swimming during the 3 weeks. You're not allowed to go swimming during the 9 days. But until Rosh Chodesh Av, you're allowed to go swimming. So could you go to the beach and go into the yam during the from Shiva Tammuz till Rosh Chodesh? Hamakar Chaim Kasav, the Makar Chaim writes, Sheyesh lihimana milirchaitz b'naharais b'mei bein hamitzarim. You should refrain from washing in the river during the 3 weeks. Mipnei sakana, because of danger. V'ha'es mesugel l'ra, because this is a time period where it's mesugel for bad things to happen. V'chein das Rabbi Yashiv Zatzal, v'das agoin Ramosha Feinstein, v'chein agoin the Stipler goyin, lo'inasan liyoladav l'nsaya liyam bebein hamitzarim. He wouldn't let his children go to the yam during the 3 weeks. Mishum sakana, the isra mazle, because your mazel is weakened during this time period. If somebody's going into the ocean for health purposes, that you don't have to refrain from that. Very interesting. It says that the Chazon Ish used to go bathe in the ocean from Shiva Tammuz until Rosh Chodesh. It was something he needed for his health. Now, if you skip the next paragraph and go to the following paragraph, Uli'inyan tipul refui. How about medical procedures? Let's say somebody needs a surgery and wants to know, should he schedule a surgery for the 3 weeks. Surgery is always risky. So is this a time period that's appropriate to do risky things? Das Vosner, V'agoyin Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal, Shem Ein Koishi B'davar, Royal Himana Me'asiyasai B'Yud Zayin B'Tammuz. If it's not a problem, if you could postpone it, you should postpone it. Don't do it during the 3 weeks. V'af Minesiya B'Motois, and also traveling by airplane. Das Reb Vosner, Shekechala Efsher Royal Himana Mikach. It's better you should refrain from traveling on an airplane during the 3 weeks. Das Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal, Sharak Morish Chodesh, only during the 9 days. Yesh Lehimana Minesiya B'Motois. So you don't put yourself into sakana. The 3 weeks is not a time for doing things that are dangerous. Okay, now we go to Siman Tov Kuf Nun Beis. Dine Erev Tisha B'Av, the halachas of Erev Tisha B'Av, Yud Beis Seifim, and here we have 12 Seifim. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph, Erev Tisha B'Av, on Erev Tisha B'Av, La Yoichal Adam Besuda Hamafsekes, Sha'oichla Achar Chatzois Basar. Somebody should not eat the Suda, he should not eat meat by the Suda Hamafsekes. Now the Mechaber defines the Suda Hamafsekes, Sha'oichla Achar Chatzois. It's the meal that you eat after Chatzos. Now later on in Sif Tes, the Mechaber is going to tell us that there are really 2 requirements to make a Suda, the Suda HaMafsekes. One is that the Suda HaMafsekes has to take place after Chatzos, and the second is that when you eat that meal, you have to have intent that this is the last Suda Kavua. You're not going to have another Suda Skva. You're not sitting down to eat another meal after this meal. But let's say you eat a meal at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so you're eating a meal after Chatzos, but you have in mind that I'm still eating another meal later. So then that later meal is the Suda Mafsekes. The 2 o'clock meal is not the Suda Mafsekes. And over here, the Mechaber is talking specifically about the Suda Mafsekes. So Erev Tisha B'Av, and Erev Tisha B'Av, La Yoichal Adam Suda Mafsekes Sha'oichla Achar Chatzos Basar. Do not eat by the Suda HaMafsekes that you're going to eat after Chatzos. And you're going to have in mind that that's your last meal of the day. Don't eat basar. It's not appropriate to eat meat. Now, like the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, we don't eat meat for the entire 9 days. But the fact that we don't eat meat during the 9 days, that's a minik. Over here, it's mi das hagemara. This is already something brought down in Shas, that on Erev Tisha B'Av, at the Suda Mafsekes, you're not allowed to eat meat. V'lo yishta yayin, nor should you drink wine. Nor are you allowed to eat 2 cooked dishes. You're only allowed to eat 1 cooked dish by the Suda Mafsekes. And in this context, baked goods are also called a cooked dish, with the exception of bread. So you're allowed to wash, eat bread, and have an egg. So even though that's shnei tavshilin, the bread is 1 tavshil and the egg is another tavshil, the bread doesn't count. But if you want to wash and you want to have an egg, and you want to have a piece of cake, now you have a problem. Because now you have shnei tavshilin. The egg is 1 tavshil, and the baked cake is another tavshil. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Nice Kan Aleph, Lo yoichal. You're not allowed to eat basar, you're not allowed to drink wine, you can't have 2 cooked dishes. Why is this? Kedei laharbois evel, because we want to increase our mourning. V'lizkar churban abayis, and we want to remember the churban, v'yitztair love. And we want to pain ourselves. We want to suffer. We want to be mitztair over the morning of the Churban. So it's not appropriate to have meat, to drink wine, to have multiple dishes. Ois cotton bays. This is the Suda Mafsekes Sha'oichla Achar Chatzos that you eat after Chatzos. Ayin l'kamon b'sif tes, where the Mechaber is going to tell us, like I told you earlier, that the Suda Mafsekes is also only the Suda that's going to be your last Suda Skva of the day. Ois cotton gimel basar, you're not allowed to eat meat. Hainu medina de shas. This is already a halacha brought down in Shas. Dilu mitzad min haga, based on our minig, asem Rosh Chodesh. We already don't eat meat starting Rosh Chodesh Av during the whole 9 days. Now we go to the Ramah. Says the Ramah, Haga, va'af mimashkim acherim mimayt b'shtiyasan mimasha ragel lishtois. The Mechaber said that we shouldn't drink wine. Says the Ramah, not only shouldn't we drink wine, we also should lessen the amount that we drink, period. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cotton dal might hainu besuda mafsekes by the suda mafsekes sheim raga lishtais besuda arba koisais. If you usually drink 4 cups of a beverage, yishte shalosh koisais, you should only drink 3 cups by the suda mafsekes. Ve'ein lishtais sheichar, you should not drink beer. Ve'im adam chalosh, if you're a weak person, some of the beer helps you, then shari, then it's mutter. Continues the Ramah. You should not eat radishes, you shouldn't eat salted foods. These are the kind of desserts that they used to have. So the Ramah seems to be saying, don't have dessert. Even though these are raw things, it's not a question of shnei tavshilin. This is not appropriate. This is supposed to be a very simple Suda of mourning. You shouldn't have the tznoin and the maliach at the end of the meal, even though that's what you're accustomed to doing by other meals. Why? You're supposed to be a parish by this meal. You're supposed to keep it very simple. Says the Mechaber Sif Beis, Afilu basar maluach she'avru alav yosim mishtei yamim v'layla achas. Even if you have salted beef, you have cured meat, preserved meat, salt beef, otherwise known as corned beef. And it's meat that was salted already for more than 2 days and an intervening night. Ubesar oifais v'dagim, or the meat of fowl, chicken, turkey, v'dagim, or fish, v'yayin migitai, or fresh wine, wine that was pressed less than 3 days ago. Nagu lesar. Even though there are reasons to think why all of these things should be mutter, why you should be allowed to eat basar maluach by the Suda Mafsekes, you should be allowed to eat chicken by the Suda Mafsekes, you should be allowed to have fish, you should be allowed to have fresh grape juice, that we're going to see there's reasons why you would think to be matir all of these things. Says the Mechaber, no, these are also, the minig is not to eat any of these things by the Suda Mafsekes. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cotton hay on the bottom of Chavches Amud Beis, afilu basar maluach va'oifais, reciting loymar. What the Mechaber wants to say is, why is it that we don't eat meat during the 9 days? Mishum dinis patlu karbonos, is because we lost the karbonos. So on Tisha B'Av and during the 9 days, we mourn over the fact that we lost the Beis Hamikdash and we lost the basar kachim. We don't have karbonos anymore. So as a zecher to that, we don't eat any meat during the 9 days. Now, meat that's more than 3 days old, loy mikri oid basar le'inyan kachim. In the context of kachim, 3-day-old meat is no longer considered meat. It's no longer considered basar kachim. In what sense? Because shaharei shlamim ein nechalin yosim mishtei yamav alayla achas. We know that there are parts of karbonos, of certain karbonos anyway, that where the owner, the one who's bringing the carbon, gets to eat some of the meat. Somebody brings the carbon chatas, he could eat some of the meat. Somebody brings a carbon shlamim, there's a certain amount of the meat that he's supposed to eat. Some goes to the kohen, some goes to the owner. Now the shlamim is the carbon that gives you the longest window, the longest time period to eat your portion of the basar. By a carbon shlamim, you bring the carbon, and the halacha is you can eat the meat from the shlamim the day you bring the carbon, that night, and the next day. So you have 2 days and an intervening night where you're allowed to eat your part of the carbon shlamim. But past that period, it becomes nicer, and now you're not allowed to eat it anymore. So in the context of basar kachim, meat, basar kachim, is a 3-day window. Not 3 days, 2 days and an intervening night. Once you hit the 3rd day, now it's nicer. Now it's no longer basar kachim that's available for eating. Now it's nicer. So you might think the whole reason that we don't eat meat during the 9 days is because we're mourning over the loss of the karbanos. But this salt beef, this preserved meat, that's already more than 3 days old, in the context of kachim, this is not even called basar anymore. So maybe I'm allowed to eat it. The answer is no, you're not allowed to. V'chein oifos, and so too when it comes to chicken, to the meat of fowl. Like how you crave them on Gabi Mizbech, you didn't bring chickens or turkeys on the Mizbech. Chutz b'tayrim u'b'nei yoina. You only brought a tar or a b'nei yoina on. Those are the only species that you brought karbanos out of. V'gamein simcha ela babasa behema. And it's also not such a big simcha to eat chicken. Simcha is a roast beef. V'kamakam nagu lesar. Nevertheless, the minig is still, you're not allowed to have chicken by the Suda Masekes. You're not allowed to have salt beef by the Suda Masekes. Aizkan vav v'dagim. We're also not to eat fish. Mishum de'ikaduchta the dagim b'chlal basar. There are times that dagim is given the same din as meat. And furthermore, fish is considered a fancy food. It's something you would serve to a king. A nice piece of salmon or Chilean sea bass. And therefore a person has simcha out of eating it, and that's inappropriate by the Suda Mafsekes. Fresh grape juice. It's not considered chashuv, so you would think it's okay to drink it. But no, it's not okay. You don't drink it by the Suda Mafsekes. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be made and against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh should send Yeshua's refuahs and parnasa to all those in need. And we should be zeicher to the bias girl tzedek b'meher v'yameinu amen. Be well.